To start with, I would like to share with you three considerations that I had preparing for this talk. The first one had to do with talking about music. The great Russian composer of the late 19th and 20th century, Igor Stravinsky, suggested in one of his writings that talking about music is like dancing about architecture. In other words, it doesn't make sense. Music should be played, danced to, listened to, but not necessarily talked about. You know, it may sound strange, but usually the people that face the greatest challenge when talking about music, especially their own music, are composers and musicians themselves, the speaker of this event included. So that was my first consideration. My second consideration had to do with the composition of this audience. I'm guessing that probably a few of you might have previous formal musical training. I've no clue what exactly is going on with each one of you regarding that. And even if you did, I'm obviously not aware of the extent of that training, neither of the general musical knowledge. In other words, the language that I would have to use tonight has to be not overly technical. So I will try to stay with this promise. Okay? So here I am stuck with a group of people in Washington, D.C., most of you non-musicians, expected to talk to you about two relatively specialized topics. The first one being perceptions of continuity of Greek music through the ages, and the second one, 20th century Greek art music and its representative styles, forms, composers, and songwriters, with a focus on the music of Manos and Mikis. This brings me to my third consideration, mostly associated with the second half of this presentation. I'm talking about 20th century art music, that is. This is something more personal, that is the emotional attachment, the bias, if you wish, that I have with the music of some of the monumental figures of 20th century Greek art music, since I've been raised with their songs always around me, in Greece of the 70s, the 80s, and before that, obviously. It was mostly the music of these people that was widely played on the public radio, on concerts, in private functions, etc. Now, in this foreign land, not only do I find myself talking about this music, but also performing it, arranging it, reinterpreting it in the context of 21st century performance practices. In other words, reliving it. So, for the music of ancient Greece, we possess a good deal of information regarding its formal structure, the theoretical stuff. We know a lot about the rational mathematical principles Pythagoras was using in order to calculate musical intervals, for instance. We know a lot about several different types of theoretical issues that the ancient Greeks were researching. But the surviving musical documents we have, in the surviving musical documents, we have only hints about the melodic structure. That there might be a significant difference between a theoretical formal structure of music, devised according to rational principles, and the actual melodic structure in real, practical, everyday music, was a fact neglected by ancient writers of music, with the single notable exception of Aristoxenus. Aristoxenus actually complained about the complexity of Pythagorean theories, and the musical structures and all the musical structures based upon them, and advocated for a more practical musical grammar. This is Aristoxenus. This is a recent picture of Aristoxenus. I'm going to go on the piano and then play this for you. So this is this is an approximation of what a Dorian mode would look and sound in ancient Greece. This is obviously modern notation of the mode. And I'll just play only the second and the third one of those. In ancient Greece, the modes were played backwards, so from the high note to the low note. So I'm going to play only the second one.
And the third one, which is purely diatonic, it begins and ends on a white note. So these are two versions of what ancient Greeks considered as Dorian. This is the Dorian mode in the Western Church. The next to the last note sometimes was raised, so this is what you see. And this is what sometimes was happening in church music of the West. I understand that you see what's happening. This is the slide with Alypius notational symbols for vocal and instrumental music. So on the top line, above the musical stuff that you see, we have the notational symbols for vocal music, and below it are the instrumental notation symbols. There existed more than 1,500 of those. This is the Arab guy. And this is the kanun. I understand that you know what the instrument is. So this is the one with the 63 strings that are tuned in various ways based on mathematical representation of the relationships between each string to the other. I mean, this is just a kanun from Azerbaijan. It doesn't mean anything. It's a kanun. I have to play for you something. I forgot. I'm going to just play 2 minutes of this. We get an idea. So there was not much change in the formal or melodic structure of Byzantine music until almost the end of the 15th century. This is a time that we find evidence that the tonality, the overall sound of Greek church music had become quite foreign to Western ears. There are a lot of people that traveled from the West to the East and came back and wrote about the situation with music in the Eastern Church, and they kept on saying that it sounds very strange. So these signs of change first became apparent in the 13th century. Modes went through progressive transformation from a more diatonic, Western-sounding content to a more chromatic, and at the same time became more ornamented and melismatic. And ornament is something like this. if this is my simple melody, if I want to ornament it in a more Byzantine kind of way, I can do something like, which is not only Byzantine ornamentation, it could be something else also, but that's the logic, that it becomes a little bit more elaborate melodically, that is. It is only in the beginning of the 19th century, though, after all these years of transformation, that this guy, Chrysanthos, of Maditos, actually he's not an Agios, he's an Archimandritis, initiated the biggest reform in the notation and other aspects of Greek ecclesiastical music. In 1832 he published a treatise where he presents a significant simplification of medieval music notation, and in addition he systematized the ordering of the 8 modes of the octoichos and introduced new processes for modulation and chromatic alteration. Chrysanthos' work represents a landmark in the history of church music, since it introduced the system of the Neo-Byzantine music upon which are based present-day chants of the Orthodox Church, especially in Greece. Chrysanthos' theory, and this is now the most important aspect about him, it was not merely an abstract theoretical project, but a much-needed attempt to establish a theoretical framework for the church music of his time, using as a basis, though, the actual musical theory of the Turks, together with a number of technical terms inherited from ancient Greek and Byzantine texts. The overall sound of the music is evidently of Eastern origin, although the words used to describe it have been often borrowed from a Greek context. This is evident in many, many different aspects of the music. The most fundamental, though, of those is the irrational division of the octave, which approximates to the Turkish system. Writers and scholars commenting upon this new situation further noted that most, although not all of the 8 modes as defined by Chrysanthos, were actually equated with Turkish makams. And that the practice of indicating mode by the name of a makam was common in the 19th century, when Turkish names were sometimes applied to all 8 Byzantine modes. It is hardly surprising that Chrysanthos and his successors should have referred to the prevailing structure of Turkish music in attempting to set out the formal structure of contemporary church music. But it is not true either, and I want to emphasize this, that they imposed, Chrysanthos imposed the formal structure of Turkish music on the Byzantine ecclesiastical tradition, or it is also not true that this tradition had in the preceding centuries become wholly assimilated to the Turkish makam structure. Undoubtedly, though, over the centuries, the characteristic musical intervals had gotten closer to those of music heard outside the church. And in describing and systematizing them, it was natural to refer to approximately similar note series and processes found in Turkish and other musics of the East. In other words, and I'm concluding this section on the Neo-Byzantine music, the octoichos, which is the model system of the Greek Orthodox Church, is an eclectic system that preserves intact many formal aspects of the Byzantine system, not least the all-important cycle of the 8 modes, but organizes them on an analogy of the then prevailing system of secular music. So, an attempt now for a first conclusion, because we need to move on to the fun stuff with Hatzidakis and Theodorakis, I understand. So, it may be said of the Greek musical tradition, as of other aspects of Greek culture, that simple notions of continuity and discontinuity are inadequate to describe the true state of affairs. On the side of continuity, we have seen and we have disparate items such as a persistence of ancient musical terms and their extension far beyond the boundaries of music in Greece, the impact of ancient harmonic theory on Arab musical practice, which in turn, through the Ottoman Turks, had a practical impact on post-medieval Greek music, and 3, some evidence of strong melodic conservatism within the whole region. On the opposing side, on the opposite side, that of discontinuity, we have a clear discontinuity at the beginning of the Christian era as far as religious music is concerned. There is a gap of surviving texts of any other music for 1600 years. 3, the tonal and stylistic discrepancy between late medieval and modern church music. And finally, there is evidence of melodic as well as formal intrusions of Turkish music. I would prefer to call those intrusions a type of cross-fertilization between the cultures, simply because that's what the reality is in all that region for centuries now. So in the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that the perception and the arguments regarding the continuity or not of a musical tradition is in most cases related to historical and scientific facts on the one hand, and the historical period that the discussion is taking place on the other. Since I believe we have sort of exhausted the part regarding the historical/scientific facts, I would like to speak very briefly about the historical context where the discussion of continuity of Greek music and culture has initially taken place, and this would create also a smooth transition to the second half of the talk. During the 19th century and the first half of the 20th, Greece, as a young and small nation, attempted to affirm and secure its own existence through the highlighting of its cultural heritage. Writers, works of art and literature, trends, events, and ideas that in some way were connected either to language or to its cultural history took front stage. The process of reinventing a national identity that took place in the cultural environment of the first decades of the 20th century in particular resulted in the development of multiple semantic expressions of the concept of tradition. I will attempt to analyze two separate attitudes towards tradition. One, the perception of a coexistence of the past and the present through the instinctive experience of tradition in the present, and two, the myth of Greekness, with tradition as its core element. The first attitude relates to the 19th century doctrine of national unity and the theory of historical continuity. Both are ideological constructs that were developed until 1922, when the main issue for the Greek nation was exactly the problem of unity and continuity. The sense of historical continuity, therefore, is created as a necessary gesture for the creation of national consciousness, and its history is based on the principle of a nation's organic continuity, which requires collective unity and diachronic common characteristics that create some form of immortality. The theory of historical continuity attempts, broadly speaking, to overcome all sorts of uncertainties about national identity and to correlate the two main elements of the Greek heritage, classical Greece and the medieval Christian Byzantium. The second attitude, that of Greekness, refers to the period after 1923, that is after the Asia Minor catastrophe, when the issue of unity and continuity is transformed into a problem of cultural difference. Greece must stand out from all other nations, and this can be done only if the collective Greek national character is manifested, leading to the creation of another ideological construct, that of Greekness. Both Hatzidakis and Theodorakis, in their lives, struggled with the issue of Greekness, both in their lives and in their musics. And not only these guys did struggle with that. So, based on all the above, it seems that what defined the evolution of Neo-Hellenic music, that's 20th century Greek art music, were the ideologies that had to be imposed on it in order to create a modern Greek identity. It is not an exaggeration to suggest that Greek art music of the 20th century is the result of the formation of imaginary identities of Greekness. I will now move to the second half of the discussion of Greek art, music and song. And this part of the discussion is going to be built on three axes. A brief discussion of the intellectual and political climate in Greece during the first half of the 20th century. I've already hinted upon that. A more detailed discussion of Greek art, music and song, its origins, the main imperatives and main contributors. And finally, an in-depth discussion of the theoretical and musical work of Hatzidakis and Theodorakis. Just to lighten up the atmosphere a little bit, Um, I would like to share a few things for you about these two guys. First, I'm going to start from the end. So I've never personally met Manos Hadzidakis, but I feel like I know him pretty well. My mentor, Theodore Antoniou, who was a professor of composition at Boston University for 35 years, was Hadzidakis' close friend and protege in the 60s when he was starting his own career as a composer of serious music. I have heard many interesting stories about those years and about Hadzidakis from Antoniou, and I believe that his own musical personality, that is my mentor's, was influenced among other things by Hadzidakis' musical ethos. So in this sense, I consider myself also one of the descendants of this musical and cultural legacy, as passed from Hadzidakis to my mentor and eventually to me and other students of Theodore Antoniou, not necessarily regarding the individual characteristics of our musical language, but regarding the approach to more fundamental issues and questions that a composer faces, most of them related to his or her own musical identity. I remember during my first years as a graduate student at BU, Antoniou was coming back very aggressively, sometimes being even not that proper, with that issue of identity. Why this? Why that? Why isn't this more Greek? Figure it out. You need to have an identity in your music that has something to do with you. How can a German and a Greek sound the same way in the music that they're making? This kind of stuff. Obviously he wasn't referring to stylistic issues or technical issues. A few years ago, I had also the opportunity to interact extensively with Mikis Theodorakis in Athens, and at some point, I asked him if I could show him my music. So he said, of course, yes, whenever you want. So I did take some music to him. He sat there for, I don't know, maybe half an hour or something listening, without saying anything. So after the piece was done, he said, listen, your technique is great. Your music is not Greek enough. So this is the climate, this is the attitude that all these people had. Now, very briefly regarding the intellectual and political climate. For the most part of the 20th century, the consequences of political history combined with the need to define aspects of Greek cultural identity preoccupied most artists. All the events like the Balkan Wars, the defeat of the Greek army by the Turks in Asia Minor, the displacement of 1.5 million Greeks from Asia Minor to the Greek mainland, the Greco-Italian War, the German occupation, the years of resistance, the political polarization with its deep and long-lasting social ramifications after the Civil War, and the military dictatorship, all these had a profound impact on the development of modern Greek culture in the visual arts, in poetry, in literature, and of course in music. During the first half of the 20th century, the entire Greek art landscape was marked by a reaction to establishing important cultural forms and a reappraisal of national traditions. A newfound pursuit for a collective national identity starts gradually taking place in an interesting socio-political context. On the one hand, we have a ravaged country from wars, poverty, persecution, and widespread misery. And on the other, we are witnessing the slow growth in power and consciousness of a middle class. In this environment, artists turn to the roots to find points of reference, anchors to their work and lives. In a period that spreads from the beginning of the century and expands to the mid-1970s, the common thread that weaves through all realms of art and literature is this search for a collective national identity. Architects like Zachos, Pikionis, and others attempted to establish vernacular architecture as the source of Greekness. Starting in the late 1800s and in the early 1900s, painters such as Konstantinos Parthenis, Konstantinos Malleas, Nikolaos Litras, Vizadios, Papaloukas, and others initiated a new approach based on defining genuinely Greek qualities and the symbolic values of the surrounding world. You must have heard of the self-taught artist Theophilos, who sought to introduce an essentially Greek pictorial vocabulary illustrating the continuity of the Greek world and tradition. Fotis Kondoglou, who is also very influential, a number of other painters like Gikas, Liaropoulos, and Gonopoulos, Moralis, also looked in the same direction. And of course, the very interesting figure of Yannis Tsarouchis, who based his own work on Theophilos and Kondoglou's re-evaluation of Byzantine and popular style and iconography. In the realm of literature, several Greek poets emerged during this period, including Yorgos Seferis, Odysseas Elitis, Yannis Ritsos, Andreas Epirikos, Nikos Kavadias, and also important writers such as Stratis Mirivilis, Yorgos Theotokas, Kosmas Politis, and others. These young artists belonged to a generation that was shaped through the experience of war. They aspired, all of them, to open new paths in Greek literature and started raising questions about tradition, collective memory, and history. They aestheticized folk, in other words, they represented it in an idealized or refined manner, and kept on searching for a balance between modernism and tradition. Many of these artists belong to the so-called generation of the 30s, a generation that brought two Nobel Prizes, Seferis and Elitis, one Lenin Prize with Ritsos, and international acclaim for many other of its members. So this generation, the so-called generation of the 30s, is probably the most populous, overcrowded, probably constellation in Greek letters. In music, the situation is a little bit more complex. In the realm of serious music, we have the creation of the so-called Greek National School, Greek Music National School. The creator, the founder was Manolis Kalomeris together with other people. In the realm of the semi-serious music, we have the emergence of the Greek operetta with composers such as Theophrastos Sakellarides and others. And in the realm of the non-classical secular musics, we have Greek folk music, Greek urban music, what we call rebetiko, and a very popular kind of musical populism centered on the musical and theoretical work of a young composer, Mikis Theodorakis, and his followers. The catalytic role the charismatic personality of Mikis Theodorakis played in the post-war endorsement and enforcement of a highly populist conception of music substantiated in his art popular song, what we call endechno Elliniko Tragoudi. I'm using the term populist and populism very consciously here, meaning that in their meaning that suggests advocation of democratic principles, liberation and free expression for the masses, and not in a derogatory way. Theodorakis attempted to give back to Greek music a dignity which in his perception had been lost. He suggests in an interview in 2010 that all his songs, more than 1,000, have been inspired by the Greek people and were composed for the Greek people. There are songs that speak, as he says, to anyone who, like himself, has Greece in his heart. In these songs, one can find the fundamental principle that guided him through his life and work, Greekness, Ellinikotita, Greek identity. According to Theodorakis, there are three words that should provide guidance and solutions to problems in art and also social and political life: Greece, country, Greekness, Elada, Patrida, Ellinikotita. In his own words, regarding Greekness, for me there can only exist two major trends in music: the creation of sounds that are absolute, clean, detached from any type of emotional, personal, or ethnic reference, and two, the creation of sounds that are absolutely personal and with strong ethnic orientation. In the first category, I consider Xenakis, the famous Greek composer of classical and contemporary classical music, and in the second, Hatzidakis. At this moment, he continues, I feel that I'm the only Greek living composer of my generation who still believes in the power of a highly personal melody. I think that the simple melodic line exhausts all levels of emotion, exactly like popular folk and urban music do. Naturally, my main effort is to use creatively all the wealth of our musical tradition, especially the relatively unknown Byzantine tradition, in order to create a musical work that is going to be genuinely Greek. Regarding the musical language itself, I'm hoping for the creation of a neo-Hellenic musical universe, and I'm seeing my future steps through the lenses of an empowered, creative hyper-nationalism based upon elements of our popular folk and ethnic culture. One more phrase from him: Byzantine music, as well as folk and urban popular song, are aesthetic principles and ideals. Obviously, these few sentences, this statement basically, is a clear manifesto-like statement for Theodorakis regarding his art. Interestingly, 60 years earlier, Manolis Kalomiris, who was the founder of the Greek Music National School, had already expressed a similar type of attitude, saying the following: the goal of any truly national music should be to build a palace in which the national soul will dwell. If for the building of this palace some foreign materials are also being used, it's okay, as long as this palace is founded on Greek soil. It is meant to be seen and enjoyed first by Greeks, and is accounted for as a pure Greek palace. Kalomiris, as well as many members of the Greek National School, used as their principal musical resources the Greek folk tradition, and to an extent references to ancient Greek drama, in an attempt, in Kalomiris' words, to represent not only the Greek colorful musical tradition, but also the Greek soul. I have some pictures of all these guys. So this is Manolis Kalomiris, very, very young. I guess you know who he is. Greek nationalism in music followed the similar pan-European nationalistic tendencies of the late 19th and 20th century that led to the creation of many national schools in Europe, such as the Russian, the Hungarian, the Polish, etc. Kalomiris articulated for the first time with explicitness the basic principles of the romantic musical nationalism, achieving its synarthrosis with the central nationalist discourse of his times, which was the great idea, what we call in Greek η μεγάλη ιδέα, of the political unification of the nation, the predestination of Greece to acculturate the Orient through the big idea, the idea of historical continuity of the nation from the antiquity through Byzantium to the present. So I made this rather extensive reference to Kalomiris and the Greek Music National School because I want to qualify the cultural, intellectual and aesthetic context that Hatzidakis and Theodorakis were living in, as well as because I want to stress the fundamental demand of their time for an integration of the fragmented Greek musical space. The answer to this demand found a quite unique realization in the work and art of Mikis Theodorakis and Manos Hatzidakis, this time, though, in terms of popular song. In their days, the trend of integrating the folk, the Byzantine, the urban music tradition of the land to musical creations of the period became a movement. The direct outcome of this movement is the genesis of what is known today as the Greek art popular song, endekno laiko tragoudi, a term devised by Theodorakis in his effort to describe the new musical genre. This genre determined to a large extent the evolution of popular music for at least 4 decades, and it still does, in my view. The effect of the so-called art popular song on the larger Greek population was so catalytic that it gradually erased from the collective memory any past achievement of the Greek Music National School, even its own historical existence. Obviously, both Hatzidakis and Theodorakis have been nurtured with the ideas of the generation of the 30s. Both maintain strong relationships with several of its representatives, and both can be considered as the individuals that consciously and deliberately carried on that tradition. Theodorakis' most important contribution are his settings of poetry to music, that is, the composition of art popular music based on the poems of the most important Greek and international poets like George Seferis, Pablo Neruda, Odysseas Elides, and others. It is because of this influential poetry, Theodorakis said to music that Greece is possibly the only country in the world where a large percentage of the population was able to know, listen, and sing this poetry in their everyday life, something that would have never happened without his contribution. A few words about Manos, and we will conclude the evening. So Manos Hatzidakis has also tried to integrate in his theoretical, poetical, and musical work, art music with the Greek popular folk and ethnic tradition. What differentiates Hatzidakis from other composers of the so-called generation of the 30s, like Kalomiris and Skalkotas and others, is the fact that in the work of these composers, Greekness and the integration of traditional folk music into their musical language has the character of a moral portrait. Hatzidakis, however, understood tradition outside its moral portrait, that is, in its entirety, including even the most rejected elements of it. Rejected musically, rejected aesthetically, and rejected also ethically. And thus creating a new amalgamation of these elements. Speaking of those rejected elements, in 1960, Hatzidakis was one of the most well-known and successful art popular song composers in Greece. The key to his success was that he drew inspiration from rebetiko, the Greek urban music developed in the 30s, especially through the rhythms and arrangements that he used. In 1948, he shook the musical establishment by delivering his legendary lecture on rebetika songs that flourished in Greek cities, mainly Piraeus, after the Asia Minor refugee influx in 1922, and until then had heavy underworld and drugs use connections, and were consequently looked down upon. Hatzidakis focused on the economy of expression, the deep traditional roots, and the genuineness of emotion displayed in rebetika, and was thinking very highly of composers like Marcos Vamakaris and Vasilis Tsitsanis. In an interview talking about his music, he noted, "If you're interested to learn about my career in the art popular song, I would say that my initial point was the truth of the rebetiko song and the Byzantine music. I took elements from both and I moved forward to the Greek tragedy, and after I gave them a new meaning, I came back to the art popular song with the ambition to unite it with the so-called serious song, just like Kurzweil had done to the German song." Hatzidakis suggested that folk songs, what we call δημοτική ελληνική μουσική, the major source of inspiration for the national school, belongs to the past, and thus it's unable to express the modern life in the cities. On the other hand, rebetiko, for Hatzidakis, was proclaimed to be the only true music to express the modern Greek life. According to Hatzidakis, rebetiko was the only music able to express Greekness with the capacity of unifying ancient, medieval, Byzantine, and modern Greece. In his own words, the rebetiko succeeds to unite in a marvelous way lyrics, music, and motion. From the song as composition to its performance, the conditions are instinctively prepared for this triple expressive coexistence, which at times, on reaching perfection, resembles the form of ancient tragedy. Hatzidakis strives for the creation of a music which is contemporary in the sense that it represents the people and the time period. He calls it his inclination to songwriting an erotic, sensual act, not an expression of any artistic tendency. I believe, he says, in the song that reveals and expresses our deepest selves, not in a song that flatters our superficially and vehemently acquired habits. Kostas Tartsis, a Greek novel writer and a close friend of Hatzidakis, illustrates this artistic and personal journey with the following words, and I'm closing with this. "So we departed altogether, with the great Manos Hatzidakis leading us, disregarding the contempt and the disapproval of the bourgeoisie towards the creation of a new, genuinely Greek aesthetic, that, this time, we thought, would spread throughout the geographical and social space of Greece through the power of music." Thank you very much for being here tonight. I would like, if you don't mind, to, since we have to stop talking about music, because music is dancing about, because of what Stravinsky said, and I would like to treat you with a few clips from a concert that my ensemble has given in Boston back in 2005, that includes both music of both Manos and Mikis. The actual title of the concert is Manos and Mikis.
Περίπανου τι λέγαν τα παιδιά, περίπανου κι ήτανε 15 χρονών. Έγραφε το όνομά της στο καθρέφτη του ουρανού με ενός πνιγμένου γλαροφτερό. Μα τη ζωή στο κύμα το παράφορο σάρωσε βάρκες και κουπιά. Στο μεγάλο κόσμο τον αδιάφορο ποιος τη θυμάται τώρα πια. Παλικάρια στην άκρη του γυαλού επέξανε στα ζάρια τη μικρή ραλού. Σαν Ανατολή και Δύση σε κόσμο και ντουνιά ρωτάν ποιος θα κερδίσει την ομορφωνιά. Μικρό το καλοκαίρι, μεγάλος ο καιρός, κανείς όμως δεν ξέρει ποιος θα είναι τυχερός. 40 παλικάρια στην άκρη του γυαλού επέξανε στα ζάρια τη μικρή ραλού.
So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do we have time for about 4 or 5 questions or statements?
Could I ask, thank you very much for the presentation, amazing. Can I ask, do we know currently which is the country that can identify the oldest music of its own culture? You know, how far back can we go? Besides this, which was like around 200 BC, that they can identify that that's their own cultural music and we have it written somehow, somewhere. Is there any other country that goes further back?
China.
China?
Yes.
How far back?
5000 BC, I think, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the actual written sources.
And the notes per se, as the black little circles, when did they come to be?
Oh, in the 14th century. So this is a very late type of musical notation. So it was finalized. The system of current musical notation was finalized in the 14th century.
Wow. So whatever
Yeah.
we found in marble had to be transliterated.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But it doesn't make sense to try to put this in current musical notation because, first of all, because we don't know certain things, as I've mentioned already. And the other reason is that even if we do try to apply all the mathematical principles that Pythagoras used, or even if we try to use the Alypius system, which is much more recent, we can get all the approximations for the very simple reason that we don't know what the music sounded like. And nobody knows, actually nobody has ever documented something about the melodic structure of the music. So it's something like, think of it this way. You remember the little piece up by Mozart that I play? We know everything about the theory of how to make it, but we don't know how to make it. You know? That's the idea. Yeah.
You said that Panagiotis was very much influenced by the rebetiko, which comes from Asia Minor. Is it the music or the context or the suffering of the people that attracted him to this particular structure?
I think it's the actual music itself. I don't think it has to do much with the suffering and the refugee.
The rebetiko comes from Asia Minor.
The rebetiko does not come per se from Asia Minor. The rebetiko was developed in Greece after the Asia Minor refugee influx.
But the refugee-
It's Greek music, but there are heavy influences from non-Greek music, like Turkish music and the music that was played in Asia Minor,
the instruments,
both in terms of the instruments and in terms of the whole structure of the music. So this is what influenced, to an extent. It's not that he only based his music in rebetiko. It's very interesting, if I may deviate a little bit from this. So Hatzidakis won an Oscar in 1961, was it, for Never on Sunday. He never felt good about this. He hated the fact that he got an Oscar for this. He didn't like the fact that he got an Oscar for such a simplistic composition. And I don't know if you know, there is anecdotal information out there that he actually threw the statue in the garbage. And the cleaning lady, somebody that was helping him in the house, I don't know what it was, she found it, and this is how it still exists. So he was so frustrated with this fact that he got an Oscar for this type of music, and his more serious music was never awarded with such a big type of award or recognition, for that matter. So.
Very good.
Theodorakis did a lot of film music, and Theodorakis also written a lot of non-popular music. He has written a lot of symphonic music, that is, and he's not known for that. a lot of such music. He studied with some major figures in Paris when he was in Paris. So he has like a double life in terms of his compositional output. He has written what we call serious classical music also. But even there, he tries to inject Greek elements.
He's very proud of the sort of.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, the Zorba is an interesting story. There's some anecdotal information there that he stole it from somebody. Yeah. From Crete. From Crete. Yes.
One more question. You did not mention Skalkodas.
I did actually. Yes.
With Kalomyris.
Yes, Skalkodas is one unique figure in the history of Greek music. He hasn't written any popular music, at least as far as I know. But he is one of the most important figures in Greek music of the 20th century, together with other people of his generation. To an extent, he belongs to the Greek music national school, but I think he went beyond that. Let me also tell you something, because I know this firsthand. A lot of his music is still being explored. So he is unique also in that respect, that his music has not been studied, or that there is no musicological research on his music as much as other people of the same period. But
Okay, you had a question.
Yeah, again,
oh, I'm sorry.
if we have like Manos with Gatsos and Mikis with Ritso, again, and what is Greek then if from your scene is not Greek?
It's absolutely Greek.
But the influences, like other than Greek.
What are you asking me? Hold on.
No, but
No.
we're questioning the continuity of the Greek.
Ah.
But this is modern Greek.
Yeah, this is modern Greek music, and as I've mentioned, basically regarding the Byzantine music, Greek music in general, especially Greek music of this generation that we're talking about, is also eclectic. So there are huge influences. Greece is in the crossroads of so many different cultural traditions that there is no way that something is purely Greek, as there is no way that something is purely Turkish or something is purely Bulgarian. There's huge cross-fertilization in this whole region. So obviously there are specific characteristics that go together with these musics. But I don't know if this is a good answer. I don't know. Yeah.
It's still Greek music.
Of
right?
course it's Greek music. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that congratulations, it was a very
Thank you.
interesting talk. Thank you. I think that we should also pinpoint and mention and highlight that Hatzidakis spent time in New York, and his music has influenced American music, and it's included in American very popular songs that are very well known here in America and hopefully in Greece. But I think it's worth mentioning it.
I will mention it by playing something for you.
Thank you.
You'll know this. One more time. You know the English words? All alone am I, ever since you. This is Hatzidakis' music. Yes, yeah, absolutely, and it's what's the name of the singer? Brenda Lee. Brenda Lee. Yes, that's the singer, but this is Hatzidakis.
So, thank you so very much. And what I can say is that your ensemble is very impressive.
Thank you, thank you.
And what you're doing is absolutely